For the last 19 months, Israel has conducted a genocide in Gaza. They have killed anywhere from like 55,000 to 250,000 Palestinians, the majority of which being innocent civilians, mostly women and children. They are starving the population of Gaza. They are not allowing electricity, food, water into Gaza. They have destroyed virtually all of the infrastructure. They are literally assassinating children because that is what they have been trained to do. And it seems that a few Western countries have actually grown some fucking balls and are doing the slightest amount of pushback. It took 19 months, which fucking sucks. I wish that these countries stood up earlier. But this is the right thing to do. The United Kingdom is looking to levy sanctions on Israel if they're to continue their blockade of supplies into Gaza. This is David Lammy speaking. He's the UK Foreign Secretary, as you can now see here on the screen. One thing I want you to notice, however, is that his verbiage is very specific. There's no mention of this being a genocide, because at the end of the day, the only reason these countries are doing this is because it is no longer the favorable position to support Israel. It really is that simple. There are multiple polls that have come out that shows decreasing support for Israel in Western countries. People are now beginning to see Israel for the terrorist actor that they are. They see the news reporting on children being starved and think, why is this country starving children? I thought they were going after Hamas. The truth is, it was never about Hamas, and shame on the media for not talking about this earlier.
Day. I'm announcing that we have suspended negotiations with this Israeli government on a new free trade agreement. We will be reviewing cooperation with them under the 2030 bilateral roadmap. The Netanyahu's government's actions have made this necessary. Madam Deputy Speaker, today, my honourable friend, the Minister for the Middle East, is summoning the Israeli ambassador to the Foreign Office to convey this message. I say now to the people of Israel, I want a strong friendship with you based on shared values, with flourishing ties between our people and societies. We are unwavering in our commitment to your security and to your future, to countering the very real threat from Iran, the scourge of terrorism, and the evils of anti-Semitism. But
Israel is the terrorist actor in this instance. And these Western leaders do not understand that they are contributing to increased anti-Semitism by conflating Zionism to Judaism. This is not true. We covered a story a few weeks ago about a bar in Philadelphia, a Barstool Sports Bar in Philadelphia, where someone paid a bottle server to put "fuck the Jews" on a sign. That is legitimate anti-Semitic rhetoric. And this rhetoric is seemingly normalized now because people see what Israel is doing and they think that's reflective of the entire Jewish religion, which it is not. Zionism is a fascist movement. It is a Nazi movement that is based entirely on expanding Israel to take over Gaza and the West Bank and the expulsion of the Palestinians from their native lands. That is not Judaism. That is why polls outside of Israel do not reflect favorably for Israel.
Conduct of the war in Gaza is damaging our relationship with your government. Yeah. Despite the glimmer of hope from January's ceasefire, the suffering from this conflict has worsened. But January showed
oh my God, I'm gonna let him finish. Talking.
Another path was possible. We urge Netanyahu's government to choose this path. The world is judging. History will judge them. Blocking aid, expanding the war, dismissing the concerns of your friends and partners. This is indefensible, and it must stop. I commend this statement to the House.
We have to understand Netanyahu's motivation for continuing this, because Lammy touched on the January ceasefire. The January ceasefire, and every other ceasefire before that, was violated by Benjamin Netanyahu for whatever fucking reason he concocted. Typically, it's centered around the hostage. Well, the last ceasefire in particular, Israel felt the terms and conditions were unfair because Hamas asked them to withdraw from Gaza, and I think to also withdraw from the West Bank. And Israel was like, nope, we can't do that. That's too extreme. The focus on the hostages was always a facade. It's never about the hostages. It was never about the hostages. If it were about the hostages, Netanyahu would not have killed the Israeli hostages that Hamas has in captivity, whether directly or indirectly, by not allowing this aid to come through. Netanyahu will not agree to a ceasefire because that will open up elections in Israel. The reason that he's still in office is because the public has not been able to vote since they are in a war. It is a wartime. The elections have been suspended. If there were to be an election, Netanyahu's coalition would collapse. He would be removed from office. The genocide would hopefully come to an end, and Netanyahu would be imprisoned for being the fucking dog that he is. However, we are not at that point. I mentioned that public perception seems to be changing on Israel, which is partly because of Western media finally turning their tune on reporting, but also because Israel has gotten away with so much to date that they feel that they can act with impunity and they can commit some of the most atrocious acts that we've seen in modern history with no repercussions. They are emboldened because the United States, who holds all of the cards in this quote-unquote conflict, keeps sending them arms, keeps sending them money, and when confronted, Joe Biden was, with Israel not allowing the appropriate amount of aid into Gaza, it was like 3 trucks a day, it was supposed to be a couple dozen, whatever it was, Joe Biden turned around and gave them even more money. So yes, they have been emboldened. Now, however, people are seeing what Israel is. They are seeing Israel as the genocidal government that they are, with this latest report indicating that around 14,000 babies will face severe malnutrition if more aid trucks do not reach the Palestinian enclave soon. This is coming like a week or so after various outlets reported that multiple dozens of children have already died from starvation because there hasn't been food allowed into Gaza in like 65, 70 days, I think is the tally. This is so fucking gross. This is so sick. There is not a word in the English language that I could use to articulate the depravity that we are living through right now. And I mentioned that I'm glad that Western nations are finally waking up to this. But shame on these Western nations for doing it or for waiting to do it until it was politically convenient. You guys are fucking scum. As far as I'm concerned, all of the Western nations that allowed this to happen are complicit in this genocide, regardless of whether or not they stopped the transfer of arms to Israel, regardless of if they sanctioned them or not, because it's too fucking late. It's too late. It's been 19 months, man. Tens of thousands of people have fucking died. Gaza has been reduced to rubble. And only now is France and the fucking UK and Canada coming out and saying that, oh, we're finally gonna level consequences on Israel. Give me a fucking break, man. Let's get into this story from NBC News. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu responded with anger Tuesday after a former military official said Israel risks becoming a pariah state over the war in Gaza. Quote, a sane country does not wage war against civilians, does not kill babies as a pastime, and does not engage in mass population displacement. Yair Golan, a left-wing opposition voice and the former deputy chief of staff of the Israeli army, said in a charged interview with local radio station Reshet Bet. Comparing Israel's actions to those of South Africa during the decades of apartheid, Golan, the leader of the Small Democrats Party and a longtime critic of Netanyahu, said, quote, the Jewish people who have endured prosecution, pogroms, and genocide throughout our history are the ones now taking actions that are entirely unconscionable. This is also true. What Israel is doing is well beyond apartheid South Africa. It is only comparable to the Holocaust. And we have Israeli officials who are literally saying things ripped directly from Adolf Hitler. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about one specific quote in particular. But again, this is why the conflation of Judaism and Zionism is so fucking dangerous. Jewish people have been, as Yair Golan said, demonized and targeted throughout their existence. They are a minority group and they have been oppressed as every other minority group has. They are the subject of countless conspiracy theories that Jews control the media, Jews control Hollywood, Jews control Wall Street, whatever the fuck. And all of that is incredibly anti-Semitic and incredibly fucking gross and disgusting. This is why I do my best to draw that line and not feed into that conflation. I do my best to be very poignant with what I say and very clear when I talk about Zionism not being Judaism, because it would be negligent for me to say otherwise. It would be unconscionable for me to say otherwise. Zionism is not Judaism. Zionism is fascism. Golan's words drew swift condemnation, with Netanyahu calling them an outrageous incitement against our heroic soldiers and against the state of Israel. Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz called the comments vile blood libel against our regular and reserve soldiers, while the far-right Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich said Golan knowingly spreads lies, defames Israel and the IDF in the eyes of the world. I don't know if Israel Katz has a warrant out for his arrest, but Smotrich definitely does. This guy is like, this guy might as well be Heinrich Himmler. Like, if Benjamin Netanyahu was Adolf Hitler, this guy is either Himmler or very close to it. It's Netanyahu, Smotrich, and Ben-Gvir who have not only perpetuated this genocide, but repeatedly used Nazi-style rhetoric to dehumanize the Palestinian population. Meanwhile, the former Prime Minister Ehud Barak called Golan a brave, direct man, adding that his comments referred to Israel's political leaders, not soldiers. The IDF is fucked up too, man. Talk about them as well. Talk about the IDF who assist all of the settlers in the West Bank. Pardon me. Talk about the IDF soldiers who target children, who assassinate children, who shoot children in their fucking kneecaps. All of them who don't resign in opposition to this. The fucking prosecution be damned. Israeli forces have intensified their bombardment of the Gaza Strip in recent days, with Netanyahu vowing Monday to take control of the entire enclave to defeat Hamas and ensure the release of the 58 remaining hostages under its captivity, of whom 23 are believed to still be alive. Israeli strikes have killed more than 600 Palestinians in the past 4 days, according to Dr. Marwan al-Hams, director of Gaza's field hospitals. There was a report published about, I think it was the most recent 1,000 casualties that Palestinians have experienced. The first 18 pages of this report have children who are aged 0. For those of you who are unfamiliar, whenever these reports come out, they do not list them in alphabetical order. They list them by order of age. 18 pages worth of children whose ages are 0. there are routine images popping up online and in the media, like this one right here, that show children, the most vulnerable group of people, either on the brink of death or deceased. Like, I have seen more pictures of dead children over the last 19 months than I ever have previously, because it's not something that you should see in any capacity ever, especially one like this where Israel is just on a fucking genocidal power trip and explicitly targeting these children. Pressure is growing internationally for Netanyahu's government to change course in Gaza, where 53,000 people have been killed and many more have been maimed, according to the Palestinian Health Ministry. On Tuesday, Britain paused free trade talks with Israel, summoned its ambassador, and announced further sanctions against West Bank settlers after Prime Minister Keir Starmer said he was horrified by the military escalation in Gaza. Why was he not horrified previously? Why is it just now that he's horrified? I'll tell you, I'm being rhetorical. It's because it is no longer politically advantageous to be an Israel dick rider, to be a fuck it, to be. It is no longer politically advantageous to do tricks on it. Unfortunately, that is the world in which we live in. We have bloodless, soulless, narcissistic fucking pigs in leadership positions all over the world who refuse to stand up, who refuse to do what is morally right at the appropriate time. Starmer's foreign minister David Lammy said the offensive was not the way to bring remaining hostages home, and he called for Israel to end the blockade of aid into Gaza. We cannot stand by in the face of this new deterioration. It is incompatible with the principles that underpin our bilateral relationships. Israel's Foreign Affairs Ministry said in a statement that it was the British government's own prerogative if it was willing to harm the British economy. Britain joined France and Canada in threatening to take quote-unquote concrete actions against Israel on Monday, calling the handful of aid trucks it allowed to enter the strip on the same day after an 11-week blockade wholly inadequate. In a joint statement, the country's leaders said they would go so far as to impose targeted sanctions if a lot more aid was not allowed to enter Gaza. You should impose unilateral sanctions. How about that? How about not doing business with Israel in any fucking capacity? In a joint statement, Netanyahu lashed out on X at the joint statement from his Western allies, calling it a, quote, huge prize for the genocidal attack on Israel that Hamas carried out on October 7, 2023, when 1,200 people were killed and 250 taken hostage, according to Israeli counts. Also, what mainstream media still does not cover this appropriately. There's a flat-out refusal to mention the possible implementation of the Hannibal Directive, where Israel potentially gunned down their own civilians while targeting Hamas on October 7th. That is a crucial part of this piece that outlets like NBC just refuse to mention. 5 United Nations aid trucks carrying vital baby food were allowed into Gaza on Monday after Netanyahu agreed to lift the blockade that was imposed by March 2nd. The blockade on food, medicine, and other essential aid has raised fears of famine in the enclave. Yeah, here, this is what I'm talking about. We are having NBC putting pictures of dead children in their articles. Only 19 fucking months after the beginning of this operation. These kinds of pictures should have been front and center on October fucking 8th or 9th, because Israel has been killing Palestinian children for the last 70 fucking years. Tuesday, UN humanitarian chief Tom Fletcher told the BBC that 14,000 babies could die in Gaza in the next 48 hours if more aid didn't reach them. The United Nations later clarified after being questioned by the BBC to say that 14,000 babies face severe malnutrition if a lot more aid trucks don't reach the Palestinian enclave soon. These guys they're such fucking cowards, dude. What the fuck is the difference? Why are you you're being pedantic? This is like when motherfuckers try to say that actually kids in the US aren't starving, they're food insecure. Even if they don't die from not getting the proper nutrition, their development is going to be seriously impacted. And chances are they are probably going to fucking die because there isn't enough aid reaching Gaza anyway. And you think that Israel is just all of a sudden going to allow the appropriate amount of aid in to feed these 14,000 fucking children? No, these children are going to fucking die, man. We're pointing to the imperative of getting supplies in to save an estimated 14,000 babies suffering from severe acute malnutrition in Gaza, as the IPC partnership has worried about that short for Integrated Food Security phase classification. The BBC then quoted the UN's Human Rights Commission spokesperson, Jens Lerck, as saying, "We need to get supplies in as soon as possible, ideally within the next 48 hours. The IPC has estimated that over the next 11 months, close to 71,000 children under the age of 5 will become acutely malnourished, of which 14,000 cases are expected to be severe." This is a striking number. 71,000 children. The majority of people in Gaza, I think like at least 50% of people living in Gaza, are under the age of 18. Why is this important? It's important because Israel dick riders will mention that this is the Palestinians' fault for electing Hamas. 50% of the fucking country can't even fucking vote. And so what? Who gives a fuck if they voted for Hamas? Put yourself in their shoes. If Israel killed your family members, would you be Hamas? I would be. I feel like that's the natural reaction when you're placed in a situation like that. Your family for generations has been terrorized by this rogue state. You are potentially orphaned. Your home is bombed routinely. Anthony Blinken said, and I think Netanyahu has said this as well, that there are just as many Hamas members now as there were on October 7th because Israel is entirely to blame for Hamas. There would be no need for an armed resistance group if there was not a colonial oppressor, a colonial oppressor imposing an apartheid state on the indigenous population. In a post on X, Fletcher confirmed the truck's entry into Gaza, calling the convoy a drop in the ocean of what is urgently needed. But Amjad al-Sawa, chairman of the NGO network, said Tuesday that no aid has been distributed so far as the trucks remained parked near the Karem Shalom border crossing. The UN estimates that at least 500 aid trucks and 50 fuel trucks need to enter the Palestinian enclave daily to avert the crisis. Israel has accused Hamas of stealing aid, a charge it denies. Netanyahu on Monday said the minimal aid entering Gaza was a bridge towards launching a new aid system in which the U.S.-backed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation would distribute supplies in hubs monitored by the Israeli military. The accusation of Hamas stealing aid is so fucking gross because Hamas is still made up of Palestinians. Hamas members still potentially have family members. They're not stealing aid and sending it to fucking Romania, right? This isn't a group that was parachuted in from a foreign fucking country to fight against Israel. These are people who have lived in Gaza and who have taken up arms in defense of their homeland. Israeli strikes on the besieged enclave killed at least 88 people overnight. On Monday, the Israeli army ordered residents in the southern city of Khan Yunis to evacuate before it launched an unprecedented attack that displaced thousands. Video recorded by NBC News' crew on the ground captured worn-out residents fleeing their homes in neighborhoods in the city's east as they ran in search of safety. Tashneem Baraka, 13, said she and her family fled the town of Abbasan al-Kabira. She was sitting on the ground in tears as she told NBC News that her father's whereabouts were unknown. I want my dad, she said. Every day we flee. We can't take it anymore. Tashneem's mother, Huda Baraka, appeared alongside her holding her infant. We are tired. I wish they would just kill us all now. We can't live like this anymore. There's a clarification. This article has been updated to clarify that the UN now says that 14,000 babies face severe malnutrition if more aid trucks don't reach Gaza soon. That's a clarification of the clarification that they made. Now, we talked about the political advantages of being aligned with Israel. And that's kind of an oxymoron because there is no political advantage with being aligned with a genocidal state. But previously, and even still, like to this day, if you criticize Israel, people will think you're an anti-Semite, which is fucking ridiculous. So that's why a lot of politicians don't. That's why a lot of politicians are chosen to be allied with Israel. It's also because Israel is a Western aligned actor in the Middle East and helps not only do espionage and really helps primarily with espionage in that reason, but it's getting for a lot of the Washington D.C. types, and I'm using that to describe a lot of like establishment politicians all across Western democracy. But I highlight DC because the United States is the premier Israel dick rider. They have stood by Israel for many decades, and have assisted them not only militarily but economically as well. And it's troubling because the United States has every capacity to end this genocide. They could literally just pull the plug on aid for Israel, and Benjamin Netanyahu will not be able to conduct any more of these operations. The reason you have favorability lessening for Israel is because of people like Moshe Figlin, who say things like this: every child in Gaza is the enemy. We need to occupy Gaza and settle it, and not a single Gazan child will be left there. There is no victory. This is not new rhetoric. There are like 90% of Israelis that would agree with this. They see Palestinian babies as future terrorists. They believe the Israelis and the Zionist Israelis, believe overwhelmingly that Gazans must be exterminated. Now, people are. This quote is making the rounds, I should say. I don't want to say that, but this quote is garnering a lot of attention because this is actual Nazi style rhetoric. So there are these kinds of quotes popping up all over the place. Like there's a reason that tweet exists where hitting translate on a tweet in Hebrew is like discovering a lost page in Mein Kampf, because this happens way more frequently than it should. Now, getting back to now the optics of this obviously is what all of these neoliberal and Western democracy aligned leaders care about. They do not give a fuck about the actual substance of what is happening. Unfortunately, about they only care about the optics of this situation. For those reasons, we had the UK, France, and Canada again come out and threaten concrete actions over Israel. This is from UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer. Quote, "I want to put on record today that we're horrified by the escalation from Israel. We repeat our demand for a ceasefire." He said this on Tuesday. On Monday, Starmer, together with France's Emmanuel Macron and Canada's Mark Carney, released a joint statement calling Israel's escalation wholly disproportionate. Their whole response to this has been disproportionate. I don't understand the cognitive dissonance and the mental gymnastics that these people exhibit, and their inability to just see what is happening and analyze it for themselves. The whole like October 7th happens, and October 7th is an undeniable tragedy. But the response to that tragedy is not a Holocaust. Genocide is not a justifiable response to anything. Quote, "We strongly oppose the expansion of Israel's military operations in Gaza. The level of human suffering in Gaza is intolerable," the leader said, also condemning Israel's actions in the occupied West Bank. "Israel must halt settlements which are illegal, which will We will not hesitate to take further action, including targeted sanctions. Benjamin Netanyahu has launched Operation Gideon's Chariot in a bid to control all of Gaza after cutting off food and medical supplies earlier in March, accused the three countries of offering a huge prize to the Palestinian group Hamas, which is currently holding dozens of Israelis captive, and Israel, who is holding more than 1,000 Palestinians captive. The three leaders slammed Netanyahu's move the previous day to allow a few trucks into the besieged enclave after nearly 3 months of total blockade as quote-unquote inadequate, warning that the Israeli government risked breaching international humanitarian law. Israel reportedly allowed in just a few trucks on Monday, but more were expected on Tuesday. They said they would not stand by while Israel pursued quote-unquote egregious actions, highlighting the quote abhorrent language on pushing Palestinians out of Gaza used by members of the Israeli government like Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich, and underlining that forced displacement would be illegal. Hassan Zamlat, the Palestinian ambassador to the UK, told Al Jazeera that the number one thing the three countries could do was impose an arms embargo on Israel. The UK has taken some measures to suspend some arms exports. It's not enough. It has to be full and comprehensive. I think Spain went this route already. Zumlaut also said that state also said the states should act to ensure that war criminals were held accountable. They must absolutely support our efforts at the ICC and the ICJ. Francesca Albanese, the UN Special Rapporteur for the occupied Palestinian territories, questioned how the targeted sanctions would be targeted. Targeting whom? You need to impose sanctions on the state. It's not about the prime minister. That is the entire government enterprise. French Foreign Minister Jean-Noel Barrot said on Tuesday that Israel's partial lifting of the blockade on Monday was totally insufficient. Quote, indiscriminate violence and blocking of humanitarian aid by the Israeli government has turned the besieged territory into a death trap, he told France Inter Radio. The three leaders spoke out as 23 countries, including the UK, France, and Canada, issued a joint statement urging Israel to let aid into Gaza, warning that the population faced starvation. The statement, published on Monday, said humanitarian aid should never be politicized, taking aim at Israel's new model for aid, which would see the U.S.-backed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation deliver supplies under Israeli military protection. It places beneficiaries and aid workers at risk, undermines the role and independence of the UN and our trusted partners, and links humanitarian aid to political and military objectives, said the statement, which called on Israel to let the UN and aid organizations get on with their life-saving work. It's worth noting that this is also dangerous for the aid workers because Israel has already killed dozens of aid workers, dozens of doctors, dozens of people from the World Kitchen. The Israeli military protection is like, who are they protecting? They're just like, they're literally just allowing the IDF to continue to do murder. Al Jazeera's Step Vason, reporting from Amsterdam in the Netherlands, noted that the statement had been issued before Tuesday's meeting of European Union foreign ministers in Brussels, where it is expected the bloc's trade agreement with Israel will be coming under review. Quote, what we are seeing is a shift after 1.5 years of ongoing bombardment in Gaza, with this blockade on food leading to a public outcry. Human rights organization Amnesty International said it was outrageous and morally reprehensible that the world had taken nearly 80 years of broadcast starvation and cruelty amidst genocide to exert pressure on Israel to lift its siege. Well, at least somebody is on the same fucking side that I'm on. Amnesty International has dubbed this a genocide. They've dubbed Israel an apartheid state accurately, mind you. And here they are saying what any normal person would be thinking. Why did it take this long to reach this conclusion? Like, why? Why wait? Why prolong this atrocity? Why prolong the death and devastation? As the world focused its attention on Israel, the military stepped up its deadly attacks across the Strip. At least 87 people were killed and nearly 300 wounded during the last 24 hours. The casualties bring the number of people confirmed in Gaza during the war to killed in Gaza during the war to 53,573, with 121,000 plus wounded, the ministry said. Keep in mind, those numbers are merely estimates, and low estimates at that, because the Hamas Health Ministry does not have the capacity to accurately assess all of the casualties at this point.